Things you may not know about Druid. Recently I've heard some questionable advices and statements about Druids, so I want to talk about few skills, traits and other Druid things that may not work as you would think they do. Number 1. Protect me. A while ago I joined a Wing 5 training and I've heard that it's a good skill for River because it gives protection and barrier to your allies. The thing is, it doesn't. You gain protection and barrier on yourself and your allies only get a stun break. Number 2. Clarion Bond. Another interesting thing that I heard in the training was that you should never swap pets on ice if you have Clarion Bond trait, because it casts a Lesser Warhorn 5 and Warhorn 5 is a daze. Well, if you look at tooltips you can see that Lesser Warhorn 5 doesn't have the daze mentioned, but we also know that we should never blindly trust a tooltip, so we can test it. I used Warhorn 5 on the golem and you can see that it provided boons and did some CC. Now I trigger Lesser Warhorn 5 from pet swap and you can see that it only provided boons and didn't daze at all. And if you want to know which pet skills or traits are safe to use on ice and which are not, you can check it out in my Druid spreadsheet in Statues tab. Number 3. Electric Wyvern. This is another case where in-game tooltip is incorrect. It says that Wyvern F2 is a launch which does 232 breakbar damage, which is correct. But another one says that Wing Buffet is a knockback, which is incorrect. In fact, this one is also a launch, so it does 232 breakbar damage instead of 150. Number 4. CC modifiers with pets. Someone told me recently that the reason they are running Pink Moa as a CC pet is that its F2 is a daze, so it scales with Moment of Clarity, Parasigils and Mesmer runes. Well, it's not correct, because CC modifiers don't work on pet skills. Number 5. Pet control. Now this is a tough one. Ever since EOD release, when mechs were added to the game, Druid pet control became a nightmare. You can no longer interrupt your pet's auto-attack chain with F2. So if you ever wondered why do you suddenly have to press F2 like 5 times in a row for it to work, now you know why. What you can do is to call your pet with F3 right before F2. F3 will make the pet interrupt whatever they are doing, and if you follow it with F2, then it will cast instantly. And after that your pet will go back to its interrupted rotation. Another thing you could do is to just put your pet on passive so it casts F2 immediately when you need it, but you have to keep in mind that after that F2 it will start attacking the target, so you have to remember to call it to you with F3 again, unless the target dies before that. If you watched my Kadim the Pre-Glass POV with commentary, you can see how I am using this to solo kill anomalies with just Gazelle. Another thing that I do to control pets when I don't want to keep them on passive or bother with F3 is to swap to them only right before I need their F2. This also assures that they are positioned where I want them to be, which is important for example on Adina, where I want the reflection bubble to be placed on top of the group and not somewhere in Narnia. Number 6. Allies Aid, aka Search and Rescue. Speaking of pets, I've recently been told that if I use Glyph of Stars to revive someone, it will trigger Allies Aid trait and it will send my pet to help with reviving. So let's test that real quick. I have the trait selected, I cast the glyph, it revives, but my pet is nowhere to be seen. Now let's do it again, but this time I'm going to press F to revive manually, and there we go. The trait is now triggered and my pet is also reviving. So, as you can see, Allies Aid will only work if you press F, or any other keybind that you have for that. Number 7. Glyphs. Now that we touched Glyphs topic, let's continue with it. I always knew that if you start casting Glyph of Stars while in CA and you close CA before it finishes the cast, it will keep the effect from the start of the cast. Let's see. I'm starting the cast in CA, closing it before it finishes casting, and you can see that it's reviving the downed person, so it used the glyph effect from CA. At this point you would assume that all other glyphs work the same, right? Well, apparently it's the other way around with any other glyph, excluding Equality, because that one is an instacast. So, if you start casting Tides and enter CA during the cast, you can see that it has the pull animation, which is a CA version, so it took the end of the cast as a reference. Now let's do the same thing with Unity and Alignment. If you enter CA during the cast, they will heal, which means again that they used CA version of the glyph, so the game took the end of the cast as a reference. Are you confused yet? Let's continue. Glyph of Equality. In a non-CA version it gives stability and other things like CC or self-stun break in a 300 radius. The tooltip for CA version mentions 600 radius, so you would assume that stab radius is increased in CA, right? Let's see. I'm roughly in a 300 radius from my ally, I'm casting Equality and you can see that it gave them stab. Now I move a little bit further I cast a non-CA equality again, and you can see that my ally didn't get stabbed, which means I'm outside of the 300 radius, but definitely in 600 radius. So, reading a CA version tooltip, I would assume that if I use equality in CA now, my ally should get stabbed again. Nope. Apparently the 600 radius applies only to stand break, while stability keeps the 300 radius from the non-CA version. Number 8. Quick Draw. I personally really like this trait, but it can be a pain in the ass sometimes. As you can see from the description, if you swap weapons, your next weapon skill will get its cooldown reduced by 66%, which is pretty handy on some fights. Especially that entering or exiting CA counts as a weapon swap. But have you ever been in a situation where you expected Quick Draw to trigger on a certain skill but it didn't, and you are sure that it's not an issue of a 9 seconds ICD? You have to remember that it will only trigger on a skill which has finished casting or was interrupted. So, if you for example try to Quick Draw CA4, you start casting it, but you use CA2 in the meantime, Quick Draw will get consumed by CA2, because it was the first one that finished casting after Quick Draw was triggered, even though CA4 was the first skill you used after entering CA. So if you want to, for example, Quick Draw CA3, 4 or 5, you need to let them finish the cast before using any other skill. As I mentioned, Quick Draw will trigger if a skill was interrupted, so if you are, for example, casting CA4 and you exit CA while still casting the skill, you will interrupt it and the Quick Draw will get consumed by that CA4 instead of the next skill that you have on your Warhorn staff or whatever weapon you swap to after exiting CA. Another thing that can ruin your Quick Draw management is the aftercast. One trick that I use here is that whenever I play with Quick Draw, I try to spam CA1 before exiting CA, because auto attacks don't consume the buff, so if I cast CA1 at the end of my CA rotation, I'm sure that I will not waste Quick Draw and have it available for Warhorn or Staff. Quick Draw has an interesting interaction with Staff 3, because it lets you use it twice with just 1 second cooldown. Staff 3 gets its cooldown reduced by 5 seconds if you heal an ally, and you don't actually have to heal them, just cast it on them. And while you yourself don't count as an ally, your pet does, so even with no other people around, you can trigger the cooldown reduction with just your pet. And if you combine this with Quick Draw, the cooldown will get reduced by 66% from 19 to 6 seconds, and then it will trigger the 5 second reduction from healing an ally, leaving you with just 1 second cooldown. It's pretty cool to use for mobility, for example when you come back from your green on Doom, but also for double healing and double blast. Number 9. Last but not least, Relics. I was recently told by someone that Relic of the Monk is not worth it because it takes ages to get it to 10 stacks for the maximum healing effect, especially in World v World, because it don't provide that many boons there. Well, if you run Nature Magic trait line, you have a very interesting trait there, which is called Fortifying Bond. And what this trait does is that when you gain a boon, you share it with your pet. Now the fun fact is that when you gain boons from someone else, you sharing them with your pet counts as you providing boons. Look at the example here. I have Monk Relic equipped, I don't have any pets selected right now, and someone gives me boons. As expected, Monk Relic didn't proc on me. Now let's select a pet and do it again. Someone gave me boons, and you can see Monk Relic procced because of the Fortifying Bond trait. Now my ally continues to give me boons, and in 3 or 4 seconds I'm already at 10 Monk stacks, even though I just AFK'd and didn't do any boons myself. The same applies, for example, to Relic of Mabon. That's it for today's episode. If you learned something that you didn't know before, or you want to share something that I didn't mention in the video, leave a comment below. See you next time and happy raiding!